This video is for students to learn a little bit about how we can check whether a book or a website are expert and how we can find out whether an item on a website or in the news is actually fake news. Another way that we can think about websites actually is to think that some of them are expert, some websites are people's personal pages, and some websites are actually fake news websites. So we'll go into a bit more detail on this video. So how do we know that a book is actually expert? So we know that the book is expert if the person who wrote it, for example, if it's about butterflies, if the person who wrote it is either a scientist and knows a lot about butterflies, or if they've done a lot of research, or if they have called in a scientist to check the facts over, those kind of things, then we know it's an expert book. And it's also really good if the book has a list of references listing where the information came from. It's usually a list of books. Sometimes the list is called a bibliography, but it all just means that the book shows us where the author got their information from. So for example, in a book called The Great White Shark, we can see that there were actually two consultants who were called in to fact check this book that was written by Deborah Nizzolo. So because Deborah is not a scientist, she's actually called in two people who have really strong scientific knowledge as consultants to just cross-check that her facts are correct in this book. So that tells you this is an expert book, even though Deborah Nizzolo herself is not a scientist. So if this book has consultants, it's often written in tiny print at the front or back of the book. We can tell that this book about the great white shark is an expert resource because it's got a list of books that were used to provide the information. Now, this list of books is in the back of the book, and it can sometimes be called references, might be called bibliography, it might be called a reading list, or it might be called read more, but it's going to be a list of books. Sometimes it's a list of websites. So how can we tell if a website is expert? So we can tell if a website is expert because it might have been produced by an expert organisation, for example, Taronga Zoo, or the Art Gallery of New South Wales, or a museum, just an organisation that has a lot of experts working in it. Now, the real thing that you've got to look for is an about section, because in the about section, it lists the expert's qualifications, and it just tells you who has put the website together. So that's the really biggest thing about expert websites. It's great if they've got a list of resources that they refer to, books and things they've used, but really on a website, the big thing you need is an about section telling you all about the organisation and the expertise of the people in the organisation. So some people say that when you're looking at a website, to decide what's going on with the website, you should use the 5 W's of website evaluation. Who, what, where, when, and why. It really just means you've got to work out when you're looking at a website whether it's expert and whether someone's trying to persuade you to have an opinion, or whether they're just laying out some facts. So who wrote these pages, and are they an expert? How can I find out more about the author? And then what is the purpose of this site? What information is included? And is the information different from other sites? So the 5 W's of website evaluation can often help you to notice if a website is expert. The big trick is to look into the about section on a website and learn who the people are who have created the website. So we're trying to put together whether a website is mostly just factual or whether it's pushing an opinion. That's what we're trying to notice there, because some websites are kind of pretending that they're all about facts, but actually they're pushing particular opinions, and we call this that they are very biased. So that's what we're trying to notice when we look at websites. So which websites can we trust? So we can trust, generally speaking, we can trust sites that have edu in them because they're generally teaching us things. We can, generally speaking, trust websites that have gov because they're often giving us information to help us out from the government. And as I've mentioned earlier, we can trust expert organisations where the people working for the organisation have really good qualifications and experience. The big trick, as I've said before, is to look in the about sections to see what's going on. So apart from expert sites, what other sites are there? Well, there's definitely personal sites, and they can be really interesting. The people who put the sites together can absolutely love the topic that they're writing about. But if we come across a personal site, we really need to verify whether the information on that personal site is actually accurate, or if we're looking at a personal site, sometimes we just enjoy it. So here are some examples of personal sites. So for example, here's a personal site that's been made at our school, and you can see that some children have written some story starters, and then some children from another set of schools have continued on the story. So that's just a fun, personal website. It's not trying to be expert, it's just a personal site for people to enjoy. Here's another one from our school where some Year 6 students have put together some photographs that they've taken. This is not attempting to be an expert site. It does not have an about section. It is not trying to be a factual site. It's a personal website, and the purpose of it is to entertain. So here's another personal site which was put together by a guy called Andrew, and this is where I get interested in actually verifying a little bit more information about Andrew and his expertise. So he's made up a blog about snakes because they absolutely fascinate him. When you've got an ending to the website blogspot.com, that actually gives you a clue that this is a personal blog made by someone who's really interested in a topic. Now on the home page, Andrew D'Urso does have an about me, which is excellent. So that's beginning to look a little bit expert because he does have an about section. He says that he's an assistant professor of wildlife biology at Florida Gulf Coast University, and he likes to study the physiology and ecology of lizards and snakes. So I'm starting to believe that Andrew has some expertise. But I'm going to have to verify that Andrew does really work at the Florida Gulf Coast University. And the reason I'm going to do this is because when I was younger, I was working on a team for an organization, and a guy came along and pretended he had a whole lot of qualifications and he wanted to get a job with this organization. And it was only when we verified his qualifications that we discovered actually that he'd just made them all up. So it's really put me off believing people without checking. I really now have to check if someone says they're an assistant professor when they're writing on a personal site. If Andrew D'Urso was writing on a zoo site, I would know that the people at the zoo have checked his science qualifications, but he's made a personal blog here. So I'm going to do a little bit of detective work to check who Andrew D'Urso is. So I went into Google and I put Andrew D'Urso in, And the next site that came up was a Weebly, Weebly.com. Now, when a website ends in .com, that's not necessarily a web address that we can trust. We have to do a bit more verifying, because .com just means that it's been put together as part of Weebly. It's a commercial enterprise. Weebly has a sort of website builders, so that's good. And but I'm still needing to check a little bit more. Yes, here he is, Dr. Andrew M. D'Urso. He's still saying that he works at the Florida Gulf Coast University. So I'm sorry to be so fact-checking, but I'm going to actually go to the Florida Gulf Coast University just to check that he does work there. And that's because of what happened to me when I was young. And that guy was just completely making up lies about his qualifications and his expertise. So here I am. I've gone to Florida Gulf Coast University, and I've got into their academics directory, and I've put in his surname, D'Urso, and sure enough, he has come up here as being an assistant professor, just as he said he is. So actually, Andrew, good on you. And now I can trust a whole lot of the information that you've got on that snake blog, because I now understand that you are an expert in snakes. So I have verified that your personal blog actually is also an expert blog. So does it ever happen that somebody just puts up information and it's really just totally fake? Well, sometimes that does happen. And this is an example here: help save the endangered Pacific Northwest tree octopus from extinction. And this website is a bit of fake news, because people who look at it quickly, it looks very scientific. It's got lots of like octopus paxibolus. So it's got technical terms, actually Latin words. It's got menu tabs across the top like FAQs and sightings. It's got a photograph of an octopus in a tree. It's just laid out in a really similar way to a factual website. And this is actually how fake news creators work. They put together news that looks as if it must be true, and they're doing it to trick people. So it's pretty freaky, really, that fake news is just set up in order to trick people. So how is it able to be a hoax? A hoax is a big trick. Well, that Pacific tree octopus site, it has a factual text layout. It has labeled diagrams and Latin words for animals, and it uses technical terms. So I'm really just making it very plain to you that fake news is written to trick people and to give them false information. Fake news is to create a hoax. A hoax is a trick, and to give people false information. So as people who look at websites, we really have to be keeping an eye out for fake news. There's not a lot of it around, but there certainly is some. So, for example, whenever we see something that might be fake news, we have to do some fact checking. So here's an example from a fact checking website. It is saying that there is a meme that has been whizzing around on Facebook that is actually saying that the Delta variant is fake news. But the Delta variant is not fake news. The Delta variant is a real type of COVID-19. So this is actually a lie. This is fake news. So it's really concerning, because a whole lot of people on Facebook are reading this fake news saying that the Delta variant isn't real, and it's really having a big impact. A lot of people are not getting vaccinated because they're reading fake news and they're believing it, because people believe things unless they are taught to check facts. So that's really kind of why I'm making this video. I just want you to check facts that you come across and just make sure that they are real and that they are not fake news. Here's another one from a fact-checking website where a photograph was put up and some fake news was circulated saying that a US women's soccer team was being disrespectful, but actually they were being really respectful when somebody was playing a harmonica. So this news post was trying to act like the US women's soccer team was being kind of mean, but they weren't being mean at all. So yeah, fake news just pretends that this is real, and you have to be really careful to check. So how do we check whether something is fake news? Well, luckily we've got some really good websites to go to check whether something is fake news. And we can have a look and see what's going on, because a lot of the time, you know, you hear something and then you go to one of these websites and you can see if it's been some fake news that's been going around recently. You can just go in and see it, and you can see whether it's actually true or not. So you're always trying to find out, is this information expert? Is this information reliable? Is it biased? And you're always asking yourself, have you cross-checked it? So especially if you hear some very upsetting news, just cross-check it. Just make sure it's not fake news.